Welcome to Business 101, Introduction to Business, online with Professor Joe Lane. We're getting ready to get into Chapter 4 today. Chapter 4 has to do with ethics and social responsibility. But you know, I was thinking as I was getting ready to start filming this, I should make sure I say welcome to you businessmen and businesswomen. Welcome to you economists. Now I know you're probably tired of hearing me say this, but you've got to put up with it. Y'all are smart. If y'all really got Chapter 1, Chapter 2, and then hey, how about that short Chapter 3? I'm going to try to do pretty well on Chapter 4 as well, okay? But Chapter 1, we know what business is, really what business is. We understand profit. Profit's not money, money's revenue. We understand that profit is revenue minus expenses. We understand what entrepreneurship is. Gosh, we understand what it means to be a stakeholder and all the stakeholders that are involved with a business. And how a new business can come in, a business leave can affect a lot of stakeholders. Which also says we understand what it means when we say businesses create wealth. We understand that outsourcing can be good or outsourcing can be bad. And we understand what outsourcing is. Factors of production, one of those things that businesses look for to be able to launch and operate a business successfully. All those things we learned in Chapter 1. Chapter 2, we became economists. We know what economics is. We know about macro, micro. We know about Adam Smith, and Adam Smith saying, hey look, don't concentrate on doing radical things to the population. Adam Smith was, I think, a Swedish economist, the father of modern economics, and he talked about growth economics. Let's increase our resources. If we increase our resources can take care of the population. And he coined that phrase, remember, invisible hand, self-directed gain brings about social and economic benefit for all. His way of saying in 1776 that businesses can create wealth. We know what capitalism is. And capitalism is the greatest wealth builder ever as far as an economic system. We know how capitalism, where the factors of production are owned and operated by private individuals. Socialism is where the government owns most of the large industries, and government just can't produce the wealth. There's no incentive for government to do it like private individuals. And the communistic economic system is the one where government owns all business, and that has proven to be a disaster. Do we want to keep the economy healthy? Oh, absolutely, absolutely. What are some things that economists check to see if the economy is healthy? They check the gross domestic product, total value of goods and services produced in a period of time, the unemployment rate, price indexes, And to keep Mr. Economy healthy, or to bring Mr. Economy back to health, we have two doctors. We have Dr. Fiscal Policy and Dr. Monetary Policy. The federal government and the Federal Reserve. And the way to keep the economy healthy is to keep money into the economy. Make sure there's enough money supply that people can buy goods and services. And we learned all that stuff. Wow, y'all did great. Then of course in Chapter 3 we talked about the fact that business is global, international trade, that different nations have set up blocks of nations or common markets to be able to trade as one. We know what importing is and exporting. When you export goods and services, what comes back to your country? Money. And we talked about that. We talked about the balance of trade deficit, trade surplus. We talked about the World Trade Organization, what NAFTA is, an agreement between the United States, Canada, and Mexico that's recently been replaced with another trade agreement. So congratulations, y'all have learned an awful lot in the first 3 chapters. Y'all truly do more no more than 85% of the people walking around as it relates to the basic concepts of business. Chapter 4, Economics and Social Responsibility. How about ethics and social responsibility? Still had economics on my mind. Ethics and social responsibility. Well, what are ethics? Well, I'll ask you this question. Are you ethical? I bet you if I asked you that question, and I would if you were in class, sort of, you'd say, yes, I'm ethical. I'm an ethical person. And I say, well, what does that mean? And somebody would probably say, well, that means doing what's right. Okay. Doing what's right determined by whom? Well, you know, if you stop and think about it, let me put, I know you've missed having the United States with you for the last little bit, so let me put the USA up here. Remember, we talked about the United States. You know, we have an economy within the United States. The United States is a society. So if you stop and think, and there are different societies all over the world, if you stop and think, our individual ethics, collectively our individual ethics determine the ethics of the nation. You could almost say that our individual ethics determine the morality of the nation. It also determines what the nation considers, our society considers, is right versus wrong. Now, a minor tangent here. Our nation, our society, has developed a body of laws to help us determine what's right and what's wrong. Has there ever been a law that's been passed, or a law that hadn't been passed that you think should be passed, that you said that's right or that's wrong? Hey, this law, I don't think that's right. Well, I guess where I'm coming from here is our nation as a whole has determined as a nation what our nation considers to be right and considers to be wrong. That doesn't mean that every individual person within the nation is going to agree to that. But if you're going to be a part of that nation or a part of that society, you have to abide by that rules. Now I'll give you a silly example. You just don't believe that 70 miles an hour is fast enough to drive on the interstate. Everybody should be able to drive like they do on the Autobahn in Germany, 90, 95 miles an hour. Well, I don't believe in that law. Well, I understand that. But our nation as a whole has said, and has passed a law saying this, so we have to abide by it. All right. But most of the time, we as individuals are pretty much in tune with what our nation considers to be right and wrong, because remember, what our nation considers to be right and wrong collectively is what all of us consider to be right and wrong. All right, let's get back to ethics, and I guess I use the word, or words. Ethics is what's right and what's wrong. So, do you do what's right? I think you probably do most of the time. And I try to do that same thing. It's important to me to do what's right. The laws of our nation and the faith that I have, you know, makes me do certain things because I feel that's right. Other things I don't do, feel that that's wrong. Okay. So, what about businesses? Should businesses be ethical? Should businesses do what's right? The overwhelming people in America, and I guess everywhere else too, feels like, yes, businesses should be ethical in the way they interact with their customers. Hey, if you find a business that's unethical, maybe you should quit doing business with that particular business, quit trading with that business. Probably a good idea. Okay, let's look at our notes here and let's kind of get ourselves started. Let's see what it says about ethics. And by the way, if you're confused on where these notes are, the notes for chapter 3 and chapter 4 are on one page. So if you're scrolling down looking for your study notes for each chapter, these both appeared on one page. So if you're not careful, you'll overlook them. Ethics, standard of moral behavior accepted by society, and we've talked about that, as right versus wrong. Now, if you look at your handout here, we talk about some questions you can ask yourself. In a business situation, when you go have your career, might you ever run into an ethical situation? Well, you probably might. As a matter of fact, you probably will. So he said, here's some questions you might ask yourself. First of all, is it legal? All right, let's go here. If something is illegal, by definition, it's unethical. Can you get that? If something's illegal, our society says it's wrong. And if our society says it's wrong, it's unethical. It may be one of those things you disagree with, but our society says it's wrong. So if something is illegal, it's unethical. Then there's another couple of questions. Is it legal? Is it balanced? And how will it make me feel about myself? You know, if you can ask yourself those three questions, you'll have a pretty good idea that you're making. If you can answer correctly, is it legal? Yes. Is it balanced? How does it make me feel, anybody else involved feel? Good. How will it make me feel about myself? I'll feel good about myself. If you can answer positively to all three of those questions, it's probably an ethical decision. But let me follow up a little bit, kind of based on this. We've already said if it's illegal, it's wrong according to society, and it's unethical. Illegal equals unethical. Now, if it's legal, does that automatically make it ethical? No, it doesn't. If something is legal, it does not automatically say that it's ethical. You have to ask yourself the other questions. Is it balanced? How does it treat everyone? Does it treat everyone fairly? You may do something that really doesn't treat other people fairly at all. You didn't break any law, but you weren't fair with them. You could have done something that was really unethical. And then the third one here, how will it make me feel about myself? Deep down inside, when you're just by yourself and you think, did I do the right thing? Well, it was legal, but did I do the right thing? No, I really didn't. So, not to confuse you, illegal, unethical. Legal may or may not be unethical. You have to ask yourself other questions. All right. So what do we need to be familiar with so far? Well, we need to be familiar with what ethics is. We need to be familiar with those three questions, and we need to be familiar with the fact that if something is illegal, it's unethical. If it's legal, it may or may not be ethical. I'm looking at a couple other things it says here. Ethical standards are fundamental. I grew us an organizational chart here. These would be kind of down the lower level folks, and this is the CEO, he or she, and we're talking about ethics. Well, ethics is fundamental within a company. I'll tell you something else. Ethics has to start at the top. This person right here cannot make this an ethical company. Ethics has to start at the top, but it has to permeate throughout the entire organization. The organization has to preach and teach and mentor and do things in an ethical manner to be an ethical company. It starts at the top, but it doesn't end at the top. It has to be throughout the organization. Okay. And I said it begins with each of us. Ethics starts with us. So each one of us has a particular ethics. And again, but in a corporation, it starts at the top. It's a manager's responsibility. If your company preaches and teaches and talks ethics and trains people on ethics, manager's responsibility throughout the organization is to make sure that all employees understand we want to operate in an ethical manner. Now, if we were in class together, and I'm looking out over the chairs here in my studio, nobody's in them, except for my hairdresser, and my makeup artist and those folks. But if I were to ask you, what percentage of businesses do you think are ethical? I get a wide range of opinions there. I'll get some people to say 15 to 20%. I get some people say 90 to 100%, or 90% anyway. Let me make a little comment on that. I asked you a few minutes ago, are you an ethical person? I think you'd say yes. If you ask me, are you an ethical person? I'd say yes, and I try to be. Now, if I ask you, have you ever done anything unethical? You know, really? You'd probably say, yeah, I probably have. I know I have. I did it, and I regretted doing it. Okay. I think all of us sometimes have found ourselves in that situation, and maybe more than once. We do something and we realize that really wasn't the right thing to do. May not have been illegal, hopefully, it wasn't the right thing to do. Now here's kind of the way I feel about businesses. I think the vast majority of businesses are ethical businesses. What I mean is, I think that most of the time they do and try to do ethical things. Sometimes do they mess up, just like we do? Yes. Sometimes are there certain people within a business that maybe don't practice the ethics that the business wants them to practice? Yes. But basically, I think business are like most of you and I, try to be ethical most of the time, or are ethical most of the time. Now, are there some of those businesses that are just rotten? The Enrons, the Arkadelphias, WorldCom, some of the really large businesses that have gone belly up because of ethical or unethical practices. You know, there's some rotten people, I'm sorry. Not you and I, but there's some rotten people. But also there's some rotten companies. That's why, you know, we go back to economics and we talked about we were a mixed, I called it a mixed capitalistic economic system. We're mostly capitalistic in our economic system, but we have some government intervention. You know, I talked about minimum wage, different laws and things like that. I think the laws and things that are passed as it relates to businesses and everything, part of that is to make sure that businesses stay ethical. You have to enforce certain ethical standards, you know, with businesses, just like I guess we have to do with, you know, with us. But I think the majority of businesses are trying to be ethical the majority of the time. Okay, what else am I looking at? Corporate standards, compliance-based and integrity-based. You see that over there kind of on the side of your handout? Let me talk a little bit about compliance-based and integrity-based ethics. Okay, let's go with compliance-based ethics. It's kind of what I was talking about a minute ago, talking about laws and businesses. Let's say that you are a teller at a bank. If you're a teller at a bank, what do you handle? Money. Is money a pretty valuable commodity of that bank? Yes. Now, look at this face. Do I look ethical? Well, of course, I'm a wonderfully ethical person. And I'm a teller at a bank. So the bank, the manager of the bank and the head of the bank says, oh yeah, that Joe Lane is really ethical. Don't worry about him. But wait a minute now. Joe Lane is handling a very valuable resource of ours, our money. And what if he put a little in his pocket from time to time? I mean, it could happen. So let's put some controls in place. Let's kind of help Joe Lane be ethical by putting certain controls in place. Well, if you're talking about a bank teller, when they get their drawer in the morning, that drawer is counted. Here's how much money that you have in your drawer, and then when you put your drawer there to do business during the day, you have so much money to start. Then every time you take money out or you put money in, there's a tape. You know, it's recorded. You give a receipt to the person that you're doing business with. So during the day, you have put so much additional money into that drawer. You have taken so much money out of that drawer. So if you had $20,000 in that drawer to begin with, you put $10,000 in, that's 30. You took $15,000 out, that leaves $15,000. At the end of the day, when they count your drawer, you and your supervisor, you should have $15,000 in there. That would be a compliance-based ethical standard. You know, we talked about compliance-based ethics. I am forcing you to be ethical by complying with certain rules and regulations, balancing the cash drawer. Does that make sense? So if companies have valuable stuff, it may be their equipment, it may be cash. If it's a jewelry store, it may be diamonds, whatever it is. Sometimes businesses, they say, hey, look, we want you to be ethical. But when you're handling valuable stuff of ours, we're going to put certain restrictions on and certain checks and balances to make sure that you comply with doing it in such a way that we know you're going to have to be ethical. That's compliance-based ethics. All right. Do you put compliance-based ethics on everything? Here's an Expo dry erase marker. This belongs, well, actually, I think this is mine. But let's just pretend that this belongs to Delta Community College. They have issued me this marker. Are they going to make me check this marker out? Check this marker back in? Is there somebody at Delta Community College who is going to be the person in charge of markers, dry erase Expo markers for the college? The answer is no. Why? You would spend a whole lot more money trying to comply to make sure nobody steals one of these things than it would ever cost if you lost one or two, okay? So you don't, and it takes time, and it takes money, and it takes energy, and it takes effort. So you put compliance-based ethical standards on things that are valuable to the company, okay? Now what's this other one? Integrity-based ethics. Remember a few minutes ago I talked about that what a company wants to do is, if they want you to be ethical, if the company wants you to, ethics is a part of each one of us, but I guess I could say ethics starts at the home for us, but in a business, ethics starts at the top. The top people have to be ethical, but it doesn't stay at the top. Remember I mentioned that? If a business wants you to be ethical, should there be written ethical standards? Yes. Should there be meetings about ethics? Should there be in-services about what you should or should not do? Should your manager make sure you understand ethics? Should your manager let you know how important it is for you to be ethical with customers and with co-workers and that sort of thing? You want to have a climate of ethics. You just kind of want the idea of ethics just kind of be throughout your organization. Everybody understands we want to be an ethical company. Ethical with other vendors, ethical with customers, ethical with the community. That's integrity. We want to have an integrity within our company that shows that we're ethical. That's integrity based. All right. I'd be familiar again with what ethics is. I'd be familiar with that thing about legal and illegal stuff that we talked about. I'd be familiar with what compliance and integrity-based ethics is. I'd be familiar with what those questions are. Now, one thing I did not put on your handout. What? I'm sorry, I forgot. One other thing that I want you to be familiar with is a whistleblower. What is a whistleblower? A snitch. A no good, dirty, rotten snitch. No. A whistleblower, though, is an insider who reports unethical behavior, which also could be illegal behavior. Companies can be damaged. People's careers can be damaged. Companies can go belly up because of unethical things. If you see an unethical practice going on, that should be reported. That's what's called a whistleblower. Now, companies should encourage people, if they see something, to report it. They should have the proper ways for it to be reported, the proper ways for it to be investigated, and that whistleblower should be protected if they're doing what the company asks them to do. All right. One other thing here on this page, corporate social responsibility. A company being socially responsible does that mean? It means a company should give back to society, should give back to the community. Businesses concerned for the welfare of society. I'd be familiar with that. Now let's talk about this for a minute. Are you ever socially responsible? Have you ever done something for somebody that you didn't have to do? You didn't get paid for it? It was just felt like something you should do. Maybe you did something for an individual. Maybe you did something as a part of a club or an organization. Maybe it's something you did as a part of your church. Maybe you did it. It's something that you did. And when you did it, you felt really good about it. You didn't care if anybody knew it or didn't know it, but it was something that you felt like you wanted to do and needed to do. I think I've mentioned earlier in one of the videos, if I haven't, I'll mention it now. I am very involved with the Chenault Aviation and Military Museum. My whole family is. As I told you earlier, I'm a Vietnam veteran. Veterans are very important to me. Freedom is very important to me. The fact that our young folks understand freedom, understand that freedom is not free and the sacrifices that have been made is very, very important. That being said, Chenault Museum does a great job of supporting veterans, kind of informing youngsters and teenagers and young people about freedom and the sacrifices of what we call real heroes. And as a result of that, I helped co-direct a major fundraiser for Chenault. My family and one other family started this thing about 7 years ago. This year we're not going to be able to have, for the seventh year, we're not going to be able to have a race at the museum as we normally do. We're going to be doing what we call a virtual race. But we're still going to be raising money for the museum. I spend a lot of time and a lot of effort for that. Do I get paid for that? No. I make a contribution myself to that. Why do I do that? Because I feel like it's something I should do. I feel like the museum does a great job, and I should give back, you know, the blessings that I've had. I should give back, and that's one of the ways that I do it. So I feel like I'm being socially responsible. All right. Should businesses do that same thing? I think so. I mean, businesses are members of the community too, right? Customers expect businesses to be ethical. Customers expect businesses to be socially responsible. Don't you want your business to be socially responsible? Now, looking at the handout, socially responsible to whom? To their employees. How can a business be socially responsible to their employees? Treat them correctly, pay them a good salary, a good wage, perhaps give benefits to them, have other things like that. How can they be socially responsible to the investors? Make a profit, be ethical, so as you don't cast a bad light on your owners, and make a profit for those owners. That's a way you can be ethical. You can be socially responsible to them. What about customers? Good value, safe product, that type of thing. How can you be socially responsible to the environment? That's pretty simple. Don't mess up the environment. You know, one of the big things we talk about now is sustainability. What I am so blessed to have right now, I want my great-grandchildren to have that too. So we've got to sustain what we have. And then, you know, just the community as a whole. Think about this for a second. Does your company or the company you work for or a company you've worked for, have they ever done anything to give back to the community? Have they ever had any kind of a fundraiser? Some companies do like adopt-a-school programs. Some companies work with the food bank. And your company may do something like that. If you ever see any of these ball teams, minor league, little league ball teams, a lot of different companies will sponsor those ball teams. Other types of activities, whether it be gymnastics or cheer or whatever, you'll have companies that get involved with that. I do a lot of running. I do a lot of racing. Almost every run or race that I go to is for a cause. It's for something. The Susan Komen breast cancer, and just like our run, the Run for the Red, White, and Blue is for Chenault Museum. If you ever go to these races or you ever see a t-shirt from one of these races, a lot of times if you look at the back of that t-shirt, it'll have a list of a lot of different sponsors on there. those people that have made a contribution to make that event successful as a fundraiser. That's another way that businesses can give back to the community. Now, one last question. Do businesses give back? Do businesses do things for the community because they really want to do it, or because they know that customers expect you to be socially responsible and it's good for their bottom line, it's good for their profit? And the answer to that may be both. And I'd say to you, is there anything wrong with that? No, I don't think it is. I don't think it is at all. If a company sponsors something and it puts that company as a good light as far as a business is concerned, that's great. If the company feels good about what they're doing, that's great as well. Okay, so I'd be sure that you're familiar with what social responsibility is. You know, I was just looking here in chapters 3 and 4. I think in both those chapters we had a decent number of be familiar with, but I don't think we had a no in either chapter. But remember, be familiar with true, false, multiple choice, matching, fill in the blank. I'm done. That takes care of chapter 4. So see, chapter 3, chapter 4, we've gone through there pretty quickly, hadn't we? We've not done too badly. Chapter 5 is going to be a great surprise. And I'm gonna go back and get my hairdresser to kind of touch up the hair and do the makeup and everything, and then I'm going to be back in just a few minutes and I'm going to do chapter 5. Now it may be a little longer for before you actually view chapter 5, but whenever you come to chapter 5, we'll start talking about something entirely different, but something that's really, really important. All right, the way I have to end this, my executive producer Ryan Pierce has to have a loud noise, which shows that I have finished a particular chapter, so he can slot that chapter into Canvas, into chapter 4 as you're going through Unit 1. Hey, we've got chapter 5 and 6, and we'll be finished with Unit 1. All right, loud noise, into chapter 4, see you in chapter 5. Thanks.